This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today I'm going to expand on something that I heard one of the, I suppose, the partners of the Coach Room, who's been a coach of mine for some time, talk about it. And he says to the idea of losing your mind and coming to your senses. Now, I remember hearing that some time ago, and then hearing it sort of bled through conversations again and again since, maybe 15 months ago. Lose your mind, come to your senses. And it's really interesting because what am I using now to construct the sentences to be able to communicate to you? It's my mind, right? I'm not necessarily tasting the words. However, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation in itself and the experience we may get from that. But it's really interesting to look at this idea of lose your mind, come to your senses. Now, why would we do that? Why would we lose our mind in order to come to our senses? Well, the thing is that we experience the world through our senses, and then we make meaning structures of those senses, so visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, and olfactory, tasting, smelling, motor, which is the kinesthetic movements. So this is how we experience the world, and then our meaning structures are actually then filtering how we're experiencing reality, hence why we can experience it so differently. And so when we lose our mind, we lose the meaning structures that get in the way of us just simply witnessing, observing, and experiencing reality as it is through our senses. And I find it very interesting. I'm like, it sounds nice. How do we do that? It's like, well, there's a lot of work behind that, but it's also very fucking simple. You just lose your mind. Just lose it. Stop looking for it. And just come to your senses. Right? It didn't occur to me that when people, and I say people because the amount of conversations I've had with people that, before I understood all this stuff as well, and myself included, would say, oh, that makes sense. When something, like, in their mind clicks, they go, oh, I get it, that makes sense. Think about it. I'm using my senses to try to understand whatever the situation or whatever the conversation is. It's making senses make sense. And, what's the opposite of that? It's nonsense. No matter how I use my senses, I can't seem to understand that, right? Someone talking gibberish, they're talking nonsense. My senses cannot make sense. They cannot understand what that person's mouth is doing. They're making nonsense. And it's really interesting. I never realized just how much that we get in the way of trying to make sense of the world, when making sense of the world is simply using our senses rather than getting in the way. Now, I'm not saying you should always lose your mind, because then, there's a whole, of course not. Like, that's not the idea here. That's not part of the conversation. What it is as long as we're not losing our mind, as long as we're in our mind about our senses, then we're never actually experiencing reality, because they're constantly tainted and twisted and interpreted differently by the filters and the programs and the patterns that we have designed in our minds. Now, the interesting thing around this is that why did we design these patterns, filters, or programs? And it's like, well, you've heard me say before, it's usually because that's, if you ask somebody, like, when did you first start doing this? They're like, oh, fuck, when I was a kid. It's like, yeah, so you created this pattern as a kid to deal with learning how to make sense of the world, and so that's why you made meaning of it, and probably was passed on from someone who taught you how to do that. And then as an adult, you still have it. This is why when people get parents, I've seen it with a dog, dude, like, seriously. But when people become parents and they're like, oh my God, I can see my father, I can see my mother, I can see my parents in how I parent. I didn't want to do this. It's like, yeah, but you never found out a different way to parent. You may never have gone out to learn different ways to parent, different understandings. Why would I go to a workshop? I should know how to parent. It's like, really? Okay. Well, who was your role models? And you said you didn't want to be like them, so try and be the opposite. And we know that the opposite is the same fucking thing, right? It's like, my parents were so harsh. They just didn't let us get away with anything. So I'm going to let my kids be way more flexible. It's like, yeah, you're going to cause the same issues. Hey, it'll cause the same resentment. It's like, why weren't you stricter on me? Like, you're not in control of that, right? Yeah, it's really quite fascinating. It makes sense, huh? It's interesting when we think about being present, is that, and this is like, this conversation I've had with so many people, and so often the outcome that they want is to actually just be present, to be in the moment, to be able to go into the future if they want, go into the past if they want, but to truly just be here and be present. Now, here's the thing about the mind. The mind can be in the future. The mind can also be in the past, right? Feelings and emotions and thoughts and memories and constructing and remembering, which is a construction anyway, right? All of this is in the mind, right? And then the body will respond. So then we have these senses or emotions, feelings that arise in the body, maybe even a physiological change, so the change in posture and a change in breathing. But the thing about it all is that our body is always present. Hence why our body is making sense of the world in the present moment. But when our mind gets in the way of trying to understand it, rather than simply just making sense, allowing your senses to experience the reality that is in front of you and is unfolding constantly and always. It's like the mind is simply as beautiful as it is, as artistic, as expressive, as articulate, as powerful as it is. This is where it comes to the idea of your body knows what to do, right? It knows what to do. Practice your practices, and don't lose your mind forever. It's not going to be as very fun either. But how often are you experiencing reality in the mind rather than simply allowing your senses to experience it and just observe it and see it and witness it and be present and allow whatever to arise in your mind, because you'll see that too, right? Allow whatever arises to arise so you can bring that to the current moment rather than needing to know what's going to happen in the next moment, because, for whatever reason, this is the whole idea. Is why I use this stuff like the Enneagram. So like a type 6, the loyalist, for example, is known as the most anxious of all of them. However, there's two. There's a phobic and a counterphobic, and they do act very different. The thing is that person in their mind will continually try to make sure that they prepare for the future, so they're constantly avoiding getting anxious even though they are anxious. So they're trying to get rid of their anxiousness by planning, even though the planning is about the future. So the whole time they're planning about the future, or the trip they go on holidays, they were never present the whole time because they were too busy planning to make sure they weren't anxious, not realizing that when they get on the trip, they're going to be anxious about going back to work all over again, so they have to plan around that. And so this whole time, all they're doing is thinking, and then they're responding to their thinking, and so they're never actually making sense of the current moment. They're always trying to make sense of future moments, to avoid the sense of anxiousness, hypothetically, right? And if that's the case, if they're trying to avoid the sense of anxiousness, then, what are they truly avoiding? Like, the anxiousness is in their body right now. Why don't they, potentially inquire into that? Like, that's the offer. It's like, what's that about? It's like, well, I if I don't plan, then I'll fail. It's like, right, and what does failure say about you as a person? Right? And you start to get to see what's actually going on. And this is another podcast once again, but it's never the thought. It's what's the driver behind that thought that's going to give you the biggest instigator, the biggest understanding of really what's driving an individual or yourself. Hey. But that's the thing, all this mood prep stuff isn't for other people. So here's another idea for you, is that if you're sitting here listening to all the stuff that I talk about and you're thinking of other people but never think of yourself as in like, oh, I do this. If you're like, oh my God, this person. It's like, yeah, maybe there's some things there for you. Hey, because this is for you. This is the whole splendid torch bullshit all over again. I say bullshit because that's just the analogy. You're the torch. And on that note, I'm out. Team, we have the Mood Prep. It's called the Mood Prep Intensive. I put it in the store. My computer man is connecting it to a webpage. It should be up tomorrow or today by the time this goes out. It's on the 9th and the 10th of March in Canberra. We're going through 2 days. All the details will be in there anyway. Otherwise, jump on Mood Prep Online. Check it out on Facebook. That's it. I'm out. If you found this podcast beneficial, it would mean the world to me if you'd pass it on to someone else that you think would also find it beneficial. Otherwise, until tomorrow, peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick. Slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.